What is up, guys? Welcome back to OverTakes. This is Misfit, and today we are going to be talking about Week 7 in the Overwatch League and Week 2 of the June Joust qualifiers. So, before we do that, I would like to thank everybody for joining me. Thank you, everybody who has been here and checking me out. Thank you very much. Your support is greatly appreciated. And if you're new, I do Overwatch League content 2 to 3 times a week. Depending on what we got going on. This week, we'll probably have an extra episode in there just to give a little preview of the qualifier round, which is going to be on Sunday. But most weeks I do two episodes a week, and then depending on what news happens, I'll do 1 or 2 more to, seeing where we're at and all that stuff. But I would like to thank you for joining us. And if you could hit a like, hit a subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, so we do not have much in the way of news as far as the league goes and all that kind of stuff. So let's jump into Week 7. All right. Things seem to get back to normal this week, after wacky week last week and all the upsets and all that kind of stuff. Things kind of came back around. We saw a lot of the good teams getting back to form or playing for the first time. We had, especially in NA, we had the Gladiators, the Fuel, the Shock, all coming in, not having played yet in the Melee. And also we had, in the East, we had Seoul coming in. So there were a few teams that we didn't see yet last week, and they all played this week with mixed results, of course, because, hero pools and all that kind of stuff. I think the meta's starting to kind of shake down a little bit. Teams are leaning on certain maps, they're leaning on the double shield or the Diva Orisa, or the kind of the dive with Winston and Diva, and then Moira Lucio. It seems to be very popular right now, and it's working with mixed success for certain teams, and we'll get into that in a minute. As far as the matches themselves go, we're like on the second week in a row without a 3-2. We've had some close matches, some that could have gone a little bit further, but it is what it is, and here we are. So we had a couple of highlighted matches this week. 2 of them were the only 2 matches that I lost in my picks all week long. I had a really good week. I got most of the maps right too, so I'm feeling pretty strong after last week's humbling events. We'll call it that. But yeah, so the matches that we had highlighted, we had the Gladiators and the Reign, the Dragons and the Dynasty, and the Shock and the Fuel. So, let's talk a little bit about a couple of these teams that were in here and what they did this week. Now, the Gladiators we had seen the Reign, and the Reign looked really strong, and they looked pretty strong in this one too, coming out of the gates, but the Gladiators played better than I thought they were going to. I had Atlanta 3-2 in this. And they came out and they kind of dictated the match. And it was one of the things that I had said, that the way to kind of beat Atlanta is to get them out of that double shield comp and get them playing something that they're not as comfortable or as good on, which is the monkey comps, whatever they may be. It seemed like the Gladiators had a decent game plan going in to do that. And then they looked really, really good. I was more impressed with their tank play than I thought I would be. I mean, Space is really good, and whatever you get him on, he's usually good. But you get him on like Diva and stuff like that, he always performs well. Now, earlier in the week, they played the Vancouver Titans, but they come in with a new main tank because they're Changsek, because Shredlock retired. So you're going in handicapped already, with no synergy with your main tank and all that, and you're not as good on paper, even with or without him, against the Gladiators. And they got to the point in the week, I kind of felt bad for them, but they just looked boomed. And especially in that second match they had against the Reign, they were done. But back to the Gladiators, we'll talk about a couple of the teams and my thoughts on them. I just wanted to talk about this match really quick because it was a really good match, and it proved some things to me, maybe a little bit, that you can dictate with Winston against double shield when you have other operating parts that are playing out of their minds. Well, maybe not out of their minds, but if you're coordinated enough, you can get rid of that double shield thing with a Winston comp, especially with the Diva. And they had Birdring doing his thing, and then they were running Reaper and stuff like that here and there. They looked really, really good. And they ran Kevster on Echo, which, I figured that they would run maybe Mirror and try something else. But hey, it worked out, and he looked really good. Birdring looked phenomenal. They seem that the support line has gotten back together a little bit. They are still running Skewed on the Brigida and taking Moth out on occasion when they want to run that. And, I guess it is what it is. I think Moth should be on the field, so to speak, most of the time. But, if you think Skewed is going to give you a better performance on Brigida than Moth, then hey, go ahead. You have enough good players on this team where if he's better, you can sub him in and out. I mean, look at the Shock. They do that all the time with, and we'll get into that a little bit, where you have, right now they're playing Violet and Twilight a lot, or they're taking out Violet and putting Twilight in, depending on what they're running. So if it's working out better and it gives you a better chance of winning maps and winning matches, like I said, I would rather have Moth on there, but if you feel, I don't see the scrims, I don't see them on a day-to-day basis enough to warrant any kind of concern or say, Moth is better than Skewed. So, cause I haven't seen Moth play Brigida. So there's that. Atlanta, as much as you want to say, they didn't perform in this, they played really well too. They looked decent, but the Gladiators just had their number most of the match. They just countered them, and anything that they tried to get established, they were just, the way they were prioritizing things, the Gladiators, this is, going up against the Reign was phenomenal, prioritizing kills and who they're going to target and all that, because you had Kevster doing a decent job on Echo, and a lot of the times they were annihilating either Iris or Gator. It seemed like they were just first in the fight to die, which is huge if you're running double shield and things like that, or if they're running the monkey comps. You get the main tank out of the picture, or your flex support. That's a lot of utility and a lot of things that just it wrecks every fight. And if you want to run those slow grindy comps, you have to maintain your tank line up in order to move in the slow, methodical kind of way that they want to do. So, and the Gladiators wanted to play a little bit faster pace, so they did a lot more to just stop what Atlanta was doing, and Atlanta couldn't handle some of the stuff, and it's not that they didn't play bad, they just got outplayed, is what I'm getting at. And if the Gladiators continue to do this, they're going to get themselves back up to that level that we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season. Now, right now, in this tournament, they're 2-0. And Atlanta's 3-1. I think Atlanta has sealed themselves in as well. So we have those two teams that probably going in. There's a couple of teams that are on the edge that were in last time. And Houston also kind of edged themselves in a little bit too, because now they're at 3-1. So you got two teams 3-1, one team 2-0, and looking really good going into the last week of the qualifiers. So there's a couple teams that, like teams like Florida that look kind of iffy at times. They got to go in. They got to play Dallas. I believe they played Dallas and Washington, who also doesn't look very good, that were in the qualifiers last time. So these teams that hopefully clean some stuff up will learn some stuff over the week, and they give themselves a better shot to get in. But I think the Gladiators are looking primed to get into this tournament. Last tournament, they did not look good in the first week of the season. Maybe it was nerves, cohesion, all of the things, when you got new guys on the roster, new main tanks, new supports, all that kind of stuff. It seems like it's starting to gel a little bit for them. Also, it's starting to gel a little bit for Atlanta, too. Atlanta seems to be coming around. I think that they're going to make some noise in this tournament as well with the hero pool. And I think they're looking pretty good for the future. The future tournaments coming up, Summer Showdown, Countdown Cup, all that, whatever alliterative name that they got going on for those things. They look like they're getting better. I like the Kai and Pelican duo. They're looking phenomenal. I think you spot run Edison in where you want to, have him in, maybe doing some shorter range stuff if you have to run double hit scan or that kind of thing with Pelican. I think it's going to be great. Kai looked freaking awesome this weekend. And so that match it didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, because I thought Atlanta had a real grasp on this. The Gladiators did a fantastic job of just adapting and forcing Atlanta into situations they didn't want to be in to win this match. Now, let's go over the East a little bit and talk about Seoul and a couple other teams over there, because I feel like we don't talk about it enough. Well, I watch it a lot. I like to see what's going on over there, because I feel like we don't pay enough attention to it. Or at least I didn't last year, so I'm like making a concerted effort to pay more attention this year. Now, we had Seoul play for the first time this week, and they played New York, who looked really good last week at one point, but then lost to Guangzhou. Seoul in this match, they did what they thought they were going to do. You know, the gesture started, came out and was rolling. Big ball and shot calling on the hog, and a little bit here, and he played some of that. It didn't work later in the week against Shanghai. Shanghai had none of it, but Shanghai's a better team, and we saw that. We saw that Seoul is somewhere. Them and Chengdu are kind of in the same atmosphere. I think you could say Chengdu's in the Chengdu zone again, but Seoul gets into those dynamics too, where they're losing to Guangzhou and beating the Dragons. And I'm not right now, but you see where I'm going. Now, in this match, this is one of the things that against New York, they had Fitz and Profit were just like free reigning all over I think Fitz had 25,000 damage or over that, maybe 30 on Hollywood on the last map. That's nuts. I think for the whole match, he did over 40. Which, in a 3-1, he was doing average 10,000 damage every map. That's craziness. And Prophet has upped his Echo game, and they looked a lot better. And I think it threw New York for a loop with them running some different stuff. Yeah, New York didn't look terrible in this, but you could see the skill level of Seoul over New York. And also, Creative looked really good in this, too. And that was one of the concerns I had going in with Seoul, was their supports need to step it up. Animo, average. Creative, average, but not this week. They looked a lot better, at least in this match. And now Shanghai came out, and they had, when they played Shanghai, which is one of the matches I lost. We're highlighting the two that I lost here. And then we're going to talk about the last one really quick. The last match of the weekend, in fact. Shanghai did a lot of things in this match to... They just outskilled them, and they ran, and Fate tweeted later, NA comps are where it's at. So I think what he was saying is whatever these teams are doing, some of this weird stuff, they're trying to run Hog, or they're trying to run other stuff, either the double shield, the Orisa Diva, or the NA monkey comps where you have the Moira and the Lucio and all that kind of stuff. Those are the ones that are working the best in this meta with on this patch, all that stuff. And they proved it against Seoul. They did a lot of things to Seoul that New York couldn't do. And a lot of it was Fleta, Lip, and they also had, in that first match they played Molly, or Shanghai had played Molly a lot in their first match of the week against the Valiant, but it was a Valiant, so it doesn't really matter. But I just like the Izayaki Li Jaegong when they're on the same page. Li Jaegong had a problem a little bit, feeding a little bit, but he got over that. This week, they looked a lot better than they did last week. They went 2-0, and they're 3-1 overall. And I think that puts them in the driver's seat in the East. Now, Seoul, 1-1. They looked decent in both matches. They got out-comped. It was comp diff above all in that last match that they had against the Dragons, who just really show that they're still the best team in that region. Now, next week is going to be a big week for Seoul and for Philly. Philly's got Guangzhou and the Valiant. So we talked about them going 4-0. I would like to see them get out 2-2, and I don't think that is out of the realm of possibility. But if Guangzhou played like they did last week when they beat New York, Philly's in big trouble. Now, Seoul has Chengdu, and then they finish out with Hangzhou. Those are two tough matches, Guangzhou. They're two tough matches, and they also are. We also have our first live event in China next week. Now it's kind of weird where the teams that are basing out of Korea, which I believe are Seoul, Philly, New York, are going to be in Seoul, and they're doing it like via the, they're going to have the screens and everything at the event, and the Chinese teams are going to be there. I believe the Valiant, maybe, I don't know exactly where the Valiant are, but I believe at least Guangzhou, Hangzhou, Chengdu, and Shanghai are going to be there, because they are going to run the prelims, or the qualifier matches, whatever you want to call it, the knockout round. That's what I'm getting at. They're running the knockout round from the event center too on Sunday. So you have that. So all the teams are going to be there from China, and then they're playing on screens to the crowd there. What I'm getting at is Seoul has a shot to be up there with the Dragons. The thing is I don't know where the other teams are going to land in the landscape, and they have to win both games. And Philly has to win both games too. They can't mess around. Philly's got to go in 2-2 and pray. The same thing with Seoul. They have to beat the Hunters and the Charge. And I think, honestly, I think Hangzhou has a shot here to get into this. And I don't know where that's going to lead. One of these teams is going to get knocked out. Either Philly, Seoul, Chengdu. So one of the teams that we saw last time is going to be out, because we only got 4 teams in there. So I'm pretty solid on Shanghai being in. Seoul goes 3-1. They're in. Same thing with Hangzhou. So, and Hangzhou has the Valiant and Chengdu. So that last match against Chengdu and Hangzhou next week is going to be big. We'll talk about that one for sure. It's just, it's not a mess, but it's interesting watching over there, them kind of leaning on, like the Dragons leaning on the NA comps and saying, you know what, this is the way to go. Usually they just don't pay attention and do their own thing, but they also know the big picture. If they go up against those teams that are playing those comps that are really countering the stuff that they're doing over in the East in the qualifiers, they're gonna lose again in this tournament. So let's head back before we talk about Dallas, San Francisco. Let's talk about a couple of the teams in here that were, I wouldn't call them disappointing, but had harder weeks than, like Toronto. They can beat the teams in the middle, but you get above like Florida and above, you're looking at a big stretch trying to keep it close. Houston beat them 3-1, and they lost 3-1 to the Shock. The Shock are starting to look like the Shock again. And I don't think it's the crusty magic or anything like that. I think some of it is the slap in the face stuff, because Krusty puts them in a good position every time they go out. It's up to them to convey that message that he gives them. And if they're being cocky and stupid, they're not going to win matches. They think they're going to throw their hat on the field. And they realize that, I think, in that off week, hey, we can't run every comp. We can't just do what we want. And they kind of seem to straighten it out this week. But Toronto, they just, they didn't look bad, but they didn't look good. And, it's some of the things we were talking about in the beginning of the year. Sato feeding. Was Sato enabled by Philadelphia? Sometimes I kind of think so. He didn't look terrible, but he had moments where he was kind of meh. Now, they brought in to fill in for Logix. They brought in Aspire, and he looked good in the first match. He looked really good, but Houston kind of shut him down a little bit, and he looked like a rookie. But that's going to happen. He looked good against the Shock, though. He was making plays. He was hitting a lot of critical shots. I thought he looked fantastic, and he's somebody, you know what? I'd give him a full contract. I say do it. You have another guy in that rotation. Maybe you don't have to run Logix all the time. Or, I love Logix, but, maybe this kid has got some other tricks up his sleeve. Him and Naste seem to have a great synergy together. It's something to look for with them. Let's talk to a couple... poor London and Vancouver, just bad. Not as bad as the Valiant. New York Speed ran them on Sunday. They had the longest match, or the shortest match time, I believe, in Overwatch League history, until later on in the day when Atlanta beat Vancouver in, I think, 20:54, or maybe less. That's playtime, not the time between the breaks and all the yip-yapping you got going on with the casters and all that stuff, or pauses or whatever. Actual game time in that Vancouver-Atlanta match was short, and you could tell Vancouver was boomed from minute one of that match. I mean, there was a point where They showed fire, and he was laughing hysterically. And that's just, to me, that's not him, like, not giving a fuck. That's you're so boomed mentally that all you're doing is laughing because you're just getting rolled that hard. It happens in life when something stupidly bad happens, and you're just, like, sick of it. I think he was at that point. I feel for these guys. They look boomed. They're trying to integrate a new main tank, and they didn't have an easy week to begin with, playing the Gladiators and the Rain, and those two teams just clowned them. And it is unfortunate. I think there are good parts to that team, but right now, mentally, they're in the dumpster. The Valiant, I don't think, are that way. They kind of are going out having fun. They don't look as ripped as Vancouver is, like, mentally. London does, though, too. The bad teams, like, that are getting 3-0, I don't know what team is going to win one. I thought maybe it would be Vancouver first. I don't know if any of these teams are. Unless London plays, when London plays Vancouver, that's going to be where you get a win. Maybe the Valiant sneak one in somewhere, but I don't know where. Maybe someone's just, like, lax and they don't care. Like, if the Dragons have them in the last match of the season and they just sit everybody, kind of in that old NFL thing. Yeah, the bad teams are bad, and New York is up and down. I think they're still young. I like, I mean, they showed that they could play against the Valiant. I mean, not that that's anything, but they beat them in like rapid succession. I don't think they got a point. Yeah, I mean, they won 2-0, 1-0, 1-0, and that was it. They full held them on Dorado and Anubis. And much of the same from Atlanta in their match against Vancouver. But let's talk about the last match of the weekend. Now, the Shock and the Fuel. Now, this match, oh, man, was it close. It looked like at times the Shock had the upper hand, it felt like. But Dallas just kept grinding at them. I can't really talk enough about how Dallas is coached and how they're playing. They are playing so well in a meta where you have to have a hit scan, and I think it bit them in this one in certain points. And also one last thing, or one thing on the Shock, they seem to have figured out control again, so that's frightening for everybody. And they did what they normally do. They win escort and control, and then they flounder in hybrid and assault, but they're unrelenting sometimes. When they're on this mental level where they're the best and they just keep going. They have no business winning fights. They have no business being in fights. And as much as people wanted to slam some of the stuff that was going on with the team, they finally wised up and they put Glisser in again. And he proved that he is who he is. He is a great player. He was fantastic, phenomenal coming in last year. Everyone talked about him, saying he's, and he performed last year, but he was on a shit team. And he played the first match, and I know there was nerves there, you could tell, and you missed shots, and it just looked kind of bad. But this weekend, he came back out, and he proved to be very valuable to this team. And instead of running Violet on that role, the hit scan, they ran him, and he did a lot of great stuff. On Dorado, he was just freaking owning on Widow. He was hitting shots left and right that were insane. And at time, he knew when to switch too. He got off of Widow and jumped on the McCree, and it proved to be valuable to them winning that map. Him being able to click the switch and go, you know what? Widow's got to go. I got to go to McCree, and they weren't ready for it, Dallas. It was like, whoa, well, shit, he's on McCree now. Just some things like that. Dallas, I didn't see anything really too egregious for them, except for that they got outplayed in a couple of scenarios where I think they let Anubis slip through their hands. I really think they should have won that. They had a chance to grab a tick on point B, and they just let it slip through their fingers. They had good momentum going, and the Shock just did shock things on there, where strikers doing crazy shit on Reaper, and they're getting duplicates and bomb kills, and just Smurf playing out of his mind. they just look good. And this was a fantastic match. This is the best match of the weekend. The Atlanta Gladiators match was good to a point, and a couple of the ones in the East were okay, but this was like the best match we've had in like 2 weeks, it feels like. And it was really close. They had the draw. I thought it could have gone, I mean, it went 5. It could have gone 6. It could have gone 7. Dallas, I don't think, has to do any of the quote-unquote work-on stuff. At a point, they're going to... I think Sparkle's fine and playing whatever he needs to play. If he plays Soldier or he goes off and does, they were running different stuff, and it looked okay, but I don't know what Pine is going to bring to the table for them unless it's on a map where you need Widow. Like maybe, on that Dorado map, if you had Pine, you could kind of distract the Widow a little bit. But, I mean, they were doing a fine job with the Echo doing that, so with Doha. So I think they're fine without the hit scan, but occasionally you need it. I think especially in those control scenarios, having a hit scan like a McCree, someone playing a McCree, is vital, especially like on Ilios or something like that, or a Widow on some of those maps. You need some of that. They kind of get around it, and they kind of do okay. They'll win points here and there, but control is a big issue when you don't have that. So, yeah, that was... watching high-level play like that is just phenomenal. Just the plays that these guys are making, the prolonging of fights, the guys coming out of nowhere and making clutch plays, and especially like on the Anubis thing, there were just so many times where the fight should have ended on both sides, and someone made an insanely ridiculous play to continue the overtime running or ticks on the point. It was ridiculous. And I loved every minute of watching that. I wish every match was in that realm of skill-wise instead of speed run, because there were a couple of those this weekend, and it's just cringe to watch. You know what you're going to get. You want to see it's almost like you want to see how high of a stat level the better team does against like London, the Valiant, or Vancouver at this point. How far can they go? How fast can they beat these teams? It seems like we're at that point with them. And they're almost halfway in the season. Maybe a break will do some of these guys good, and they'll regroup and get a little bit better, or they bring in other players. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but who knows? Okay, so let's go over the standings in the for the June Joust right now, where we sit before these teams get into their last week of play, and who's in, who's out, and that kind of stuff, and what we need to expect. Just a little precursor in the next week, and then we're going to wrap this one up, guys. West, currently, we have Atlanta, Houston, Boston, the Gladiators, and the Shock. Atlanta's 3-1, Houston's 3-1, Boston's 2-0. I forgot about them earlier. Gladiators are 2-0, and the Shock are 2-0. Dallas, Paris, Florida are sitting at 1-1 with 2 to play. Florida's got a tough week with Dallas and Washington. That's going to shake things up a little bit for especially Dallas and Florida. What happens with those two teams? Florida loses, they might be out. Dallas loses, they might be out. So who knows? Right now, Boston has... Let's look at Boston's schedule really quick. These are teams that... they have Paris and Los Angeles, Gladiators. So there's a lot going on next week. A lot of big matches, and... that are going to determine some of the stuff. So I think you could look at potentially the teams that you're going to see in there, obviously varying on what happens. Washington, potentially, if they figured out what was going on, like what they were doing wrong and all that stuff, they go 2-0, that puts them at 2-2. That knocks Florida down, and see where I'm going here? There's potential for them to move up. You might be stuck right where you're at. Boston probably goes 1-1, so you're looking at 3-1 Boston, and that knocks Paris down, and that probably the Gladiators will move up. So yeah, there's a lot of movement that could happen this week. A lot of big matches that we're going to get into later on in the week. The East is a little bit weird too, where you have Shanghai, Hangzhou, New York, and Guangzhou in the top 4. But waiting in the wings, you have Seoul and Chengdu, who are going to decide their own fates this week because they play each other. Now, Hangzhou could go 2-0, at minimum 1-1, and solidify themselves in the tournament at 3-1. New York at 2-2 is on the cusp. I think there's a good possibility they get knocked out with either Seoul or Chengdu going up. And Philly's kind of a wild card in there, but at 2-2 with 4 teams, I don't know. It's kind of hard. They kind of dug themselves into a hole. That's the problem when there's 4 matches. So we'll see what happens over there. There's some big matches over there too. But yeah, that's just a little bit of looking at the standings, and hopefully we get some good matches next week that lead us into the knockout rounds, which we're going to spend some time talking about early, and then we'll have an episode in the middle somewhere on Saturday night / Sunday morning. I'll have something before the matches start on Sunday, so we can get a little preview, maybe my bracket in this, and see if I do better than I did last time, where I did good later on in the bracket, where I had the winners final, but it got convoluted and weird in the middle with teams of like Dallas going on a run. After we saw Dallas, but then we went to the tournament section, you kind of could see where Dallas is going, and we'll see what happens. This is going to be great. I can't wait for this week to get rolling again. I'll see you guys in middle end of the, Wednesday, Thursday, like normal. And like I said, we'll do a Saturday night one / early Sunday morning whenever I can get it up. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you very much for all of your support. Everybody that's been viewing, liking, subscribing, all that stuff. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. If you're new, thanks for sticking around. It's been great having you here. Please hit a like, hit a subscribe, and hit the alert bell so you know when I got Overwatch League content coming up. This is Misfit. I'm out. Everybody stay safe. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you on the next one.